The CoinDesk Spotlight is brought to you by Nexo, the place to earn on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more.
Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong tweeting the SEC is, quote, refusing to offer any opinion in writing to the industry on what should be allowed and why, and instead are engaging in intimidation tactics behind closed doors. Whatever their theory is here, it feels like a reach land grab versus other regulators. Is this true? Is this a way for the SEC to claim authority over crypto? Joining us now to discuss is former CFTC chair, author of Crypto Dad, and senior counsel at Wilkie Farr and Gallagher, Chris Giancarlo in New York. Welcome to the show, Chris, and very much looking forward to your book launch in October 26th. But before we get to that, I would like to hear, what do you make of Coinbase's roadblock with the SEC and their CEO's claim that the SEC is after a land grab versus other U.S. regulators?
Morning, Christine. It's good to be with you. Lawrence, good to see you again. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be with you this morning. I read Brian Armstrong's tweets, I guess, along with all the rest of us. And it's not my practice to be critical of people that are in those regulatory chairs, having been in one myself and benefited greatly from my predecessors not criticizing my work. But I will tell you, and it's something I actually talk about in my book, is that the chairs have a fair amount of discretion in terms of applying rule sets. And one of the things that we faced at the CFTC is we realized that a lot of our rule sets really weren't applicable to this new innovation, to crypto itself. And in fact, in one case in 2017, some of our rules defined what is physical delivery of crypto and defined that in really very analog ways. And we realized it really didn't make a lot of sense in the world of crypto. And so what we did was suspended enforcement activity while we clarified our rules. And we put out some rule clarifications at the end of 2017 to explain what does physical delivery mean in the world of crypto. And until we felt that until our rules were clear, how could we then create a sort of a jeopardy situation for firms that were trying to comply with rules that were not clear? And so our priority was to clarify our rules and then look at enforcement activity. Now, as I say, every chair has got discretion in this area, but that was the approach we took, and it's something that I've explained in my book, how that discretion works and why it's so important for this new innovation that we not apply 90-year-old statutes, which is effectively what we have for the Commodities Exchange Act and for the SEC, against a new innovation that was never contemplated in the 1930s when those statutes were written.
Chris, it's interesting you say that because people were very optimistic about SEC Chair Gary Gensler coming on board because he's very knowledgeable about crypto. He taught classes at MIT on it. He was touted as being crypto friendly, but even Coinbase's Brian Armstrong is now saying he's not so sure about that. And you've been touted as crypto dad, so perhaps you can relate. Would you have handled things differently in Gensler's shoes?
Well, here's what I would say. There's this innovation presents the opportunity to solve some of the worst elements of our existing structure, and the worst elements are its slowness, its expensiveness, and probably most unfortunate, its exclusiveness. Basically, we have a system now that if you don't have identity, you can't use payment system, and more importantly, if you're not wealthy, you can't invest in the best opportunities in the marketplace. And this innovation basically solves all those problems: speed, latency, cost, exclusivity, and it's brought in a whole new generation, not necessarily wealthy people, but ordinary people into the marketplace. People that haven't been excited about Wall Street or banking, in a generation are excited about this. And so what we've got to think about is, do we really want to extend the existing system with its slowness, its latency, its costliness, and its exclusivity to wealthy people? Or do we want to take advantage of some of the opportunities offered by this new technology? And if we do, we need to see it as revolutionary and be willing to be flexible with our existing models, with our existing system, and look to this innovation to modernize those shortcomings of the existing system.
So, Chris, does the SEC, though, really have jurisdiction when it comes to what Coinbase was offering or was planning to offer? was it really something akin to a security, or was it more of a banking product, or what? How would you describe it?
Well, again, I only know what I've read, and according to Brian Armstrong, the SEC hasn't put forward an explanation of what their authority is. But ultimately, it will be the courts that will have to determine jurisdiction and apply the securities laws to these asset classes. And I'm optimistic that Congress steps in and Congress says, wait a minute, these statutes were written 1933, 1934, 1936 in the case of the CFTC. I mean, there's no way they contemplated this new innovation. So these new innovations. So it's up to regulators in the short term to apply the laws in a sensible, practical, responsible manner. And long term, it's necessary for Congress to step in and probably come up with a new approach to this innovation, recognizing its potential to solve shortcomings of our existing financial system.
Chris, last time you were here, thanks to our federal system, states also regulate companies, of course, and financial products. And last time you were here, we talked about you joining Blockfi's board. You've since left. Is that related to how New Jersey regulators and other state regulators were viewing Blockfi's or are viewing Blockfi's business and some of the actions they've taken against Blockfi?
Yeah, so, really, my decision with regard to Blockfi is really about my own portfolio rebalancing. I'm on 4 boards. I'm on 5 advisory boards. I've got a foundation, the Digital Dollar Project, which is about to go into hyperdrive. We'll soon be announcing 2 major pilot programs, which are in testing mode right now. And of course, I've now got a book out, or we'll have a book out, and I'm starting a 75-day book tour. And so it's about bandwidth management. It's a conversation I had begun with Zach and the folks at Blockfi weeks before. But I remain an advisor to the company and will be helping them to navigate through the what you mentioned, the attention they're getting from state regulators. And so, look, these are disruptive new technologies. They are going to challenge pillars of the existing system. But in that, as with all new innovations, they both create challenges, but enormous opportunities. What we're looking at is, quite frankly, it's bigger than Blockfi. It's bigger than CoinDesk TV. It's bigger than all of us. This is the third wave of the internet. And anybody that thought they could stop the first wave or the second wave have learned their lesson. This innovation is going to overwhelm the existing system. And as I've said, and as I say in my book, we've got choices to make. We can either try to hide from it, try to avoid getting knocked over from it, or we can hitch a sail and try to ride it. And that's what we tried to do at the CFTC during my time there. And I think that's, quite frankly, what we in the United States have historically done with new innovations and new technologies, and what we've got to do with this one.
So are you saying Blockfi is basically facing the same problem that Coinbase is facing, in that the current legal frameworks available just are not up to date to this new technology? And I want to put that in context because they are trying to address this. We have Brian Armstrong tweeting again that the SEC was the only regulator that refused to meet with him, saying, quote, "We're not meeting with any crypto companies." And this was right after Coinbase became the first crypto company to go public in the United States. Is this attitude typical?
Well, again, I'm not going to criticize a fellow regulator. I will tell you what we did at the CFTC. Immediately upon my arrival, I launched Lab CFTC because there was no vehicle at the CFTC then to meet with innovators that could bring face-to-face with innovators, regulators who understood the innovation, understood the challenges it faced, understood where it might be a round peg in a square hole or a square peg in a round hole in terms of the CFTC's existing regulatory structure, and could look to address that. So I think dialogue is critically important, and that's what we did at the CFTC. And I'm pleased to say that I think in many ways, Lab CFTC became a model for other federal and state regulators in terms of how to interact with innovators and this new wave of the internet.
So, Chris, regulators have to, at least federal regulators, come up with what they regulate based on mandates by the Congress. Has Congress learned anything about crypto in recent weeks and recent months? Does it still know a little too little, or given what we've seen with, for instance, the infrastructure bill, does it know a little too much to the point that they're willing and wanting to severely hamper the industry in the United States?
Well, Congress has certainly recognized that crypto is an area that can be taxed in order to raise revenue for other projects. So in some ways, Congress has very much, and that's perhaps a bit of a snarky view on my part, but certainly Congress in the last few months has really recognized crypto. And as my former colleague Jeff Bandman notes, in some small way, the crypto now is part of the landscape because it's a source of revenue for Congress and its tireless efforts to find ways to fund government. What I would say, though, is during the course of that process, I think a lot more congressmen and women and senators have woken up to this technology, how its power and its potential. I'm not saying that's across the board, but it's certainly across the aisle. In my conversations with a number of senators and congressmen and women, I see a growing understanding of this innovation. Now, in some cases, it's concerned to whether it threatens the legacy banking system. In other cases, it's the recognition that actually this innovation might provide solutions to the shortcomings of the existing system. So I actually think there's, aside from the infrastructure bill, I actually think there's a growing awareness of the potential of this in Congress. And ultimately, it will be Congress that's going to have to step in and decide what is U.S. public policy with regard to this innovation, and therefore, what's the best way to effectuate that public policy? What are the best regulatory agencies to do that? Now, of course, no surprise here. I'm a champion for a big role for the CFTC. Why? Because for 4 years, the CFTC has been walking that walk. No other federal regulator here, quite frankly, no other regulator in the world has created a successful, functioning, regulated marketplace for crypto, in this case, crypto derivatives, other than the CFTC. And it's working. The proof is in the pudding. It's a very, very successful regulated marketplace. And so the CFTC has learned a lot. It has developed a lot of expertise. It's developed a lot of surveillance capability. It's a very competent regulator when it comes to crypto, and it deserves a seat at the regulatory table.
Chris, I want to get to your book, Crypto Dad, The Fight for the Future of Money. It will be released on October 26th on Amazon. And I understand that you go into your experiences in Washington, D.C. and how you address crypto in it. Perhaps you could give us some of the highlights.
I went to the CFTC in 2014, really to complete the reforms to the global swaps market. I had been following the development of crypto, and I talk a little bit about that in the book as a minority commissioner. But it really developed in 2017 with the Bitcoin rally 1.0 and the approach we received from several of our key exchanges to license Bitcoin futures, or to greenlight the launch of Bitcoin futures. And in the book, I talk about really a lot of the sort of both subtle and not so subtle opposition that we face. I mean, calls from overseas regulators saying, if you do this, you're legitimizing Bitcoin and you're going to cause the collapse of the financial system around the world, and a lot of opposition. But we went forward anyway, and I explained why that was and why that was the right thing to do. And as a result, if you are operating a crypto derivative marketplace under the CFTC regs, you know where you stand. The guidelines are clear. The market is working. The CFTC has moved forward as the world's foremost regulator in the space. And I think it was because we had the courage to move forward and not be held back by, doom and gloom and FUD assertions by both official people in Washington, but also in the press and otherwise. So it's a story about that, but it's also a look forward as to what do we need to do for crypto going forward, how this really provides solutions to the shortcomings, the exclusivity the financial under-inclusion of our existing system, the slowness, the legacy, the latency of it. And then also it talks about sovereign digital currency, central bank digital currency. I believe every major economy will develop central bank digital currency in the next decade. And right now, the United States is leading from behind. And I think there's unfortunate ramifications if we continue on that course of being not a leader, but a laggard in that development of digital money.
So, Chris, I have to ask you, since you touched on the subject of at least central bank digital currencies, did you also talk about stablecoins, specifically Tether? While you were running the CFTC, of course, you guys subpoenaed Tether and Bitfinex and what have you. Was it related to their belief that they were issuing Tether without backing, or was it related to the assets that they claimed backed those Tether?
It was my policy as chairman of the agency not to comment on enforcement matters when I was at the agency, and it's still my policy today not to comment on enforcement matters since I've left the agency. So I have no comment on that.
Okay, but Tether did tell us at least that they couldn't give their exact assets because they're too similar. At least it would be giving away their secret sauce. Like, for instance, they claim something like Bridgewater would do. Of course, Bridgewater is a fund. They release what they do. How is that different? The assets hold that a stablecoin like that holds. How would that differ from, let's say, what a digital dollar would do, the digital dollar concept?
I do talk about stablecoins quite a bit in my book. And it is my personal view that even if the United States develops a digital dollar, which I expect it will, that it should not suppress the development of stablecoins. For one, the United States has a lot to learn from stablecoin development. Again, this has been going on for years while the United States is still studying the subject. The United States government can learn a lot from stablecoins. Number two, I think the development of stablecoins may, in a way, keep a central bank digital currency honest. And why do I say that? Well, one of the big concerns that I raise in the book is issues of privacy and censorship in terms of a central bank digital currency. Right now, your cash money can't be censored and its use is entirely private. Those are values along with the rule of law and free speech and free markets that need to be encoded in a digital currency. And if there is no choice but a digital currency, then it could be a problem if the United States government or other governments sought to censor use of that digital currency or invade people's privacy in their use of that digital currency. And the availability of alternatives, whether they be Bitcoin or stable coins, in many ways will keep governments honest in perhaps misguided attempts to either censor use of digital money or invade people's privacy and gather information on how people use digital currency. So I'm a fan of proper, innovative stablecoin development. Although, I am very sensitive to concerns raised by my predecessor at the CFTC, Tim Massad, in various articles about stablecoins, lack of transparency, lack of clear rules of the road. And there too, I think Congress has a role to play in developing guidelines for stablecoin construction and operation and disclosure.
Chris, speaking of stablecoins, you're the co-founder of the Digital Dollar Foundation, so I wonder what you see in the future there. And is the dollar status as a reserve currency in the world put in jeopardy as other nations look to create their own CBDCs and, in the case of El Salvador, make Bitcoin legal tender?
Yeah, so look, there's a lot of people, I think, well, not a lot, but there's some people running around, the sky is falling, the United States dollar is going to lose its global reserve currency if we don't move forward faster with the digital dollar. I'm not one of them. I think the dollar has so many strong underpinnings. Its role in the global economy perhaps is never been greater than it is now and will endure for a long time to come. Having said that, since the dawn of time, one feature that has made one currency in history great, more important than another currency, has been technological features. The dollar is named after the Spanish dollar, which had technological superiority over other currencies because it was fractionable, because you could divide it into 8 equal pieces known as pieces of 8. That was a technological advantage over other currencies and helped that currency, along with the fact that it was minted with better silver than the others, a global reserve currency of its time. And so we do need to be conscious of technological superiority that digitization of currency will provide. And let's be sanguine about what China's doing. China's not just developing a digital yuan. It's much bigger than that. China is looking to develop the first fully digitally networked economy where transactions, whether they be in futures or in equities or commercial lending or payment transfers, will all be networked using blockchain technology into a unified whole. All transactions in the digital yuan will be part of this amazingly networked economy, offering much greater speed, much lower cost, much greater inclusion, and an ability to send an already fast-growing economy into hyperdrive by taking out that cost and latency. So the United States needs to think about a digital currency in more than just a payment, digital payments, but more about wringing out cost from the U.S. economy. We know we pay more than most other countries for payments in the United States. We know we have over 5% of our population excluded from our system. We know, let's be honest, there are shortcomings in our existing system. Let's address them. Let's take advantage of this technology to address the shortcomings in systems in the way we've taken advantage of earlier technologies for economic growth and greater inclusion. Let's do the same with this new technology and not throttle it in its early stage with regulations that were designed for a world 90 years ago that are not designed for this world today.